today what we're going to be making is something called Anzac Biscuits. So that leads me quickly on to the first question that I would like to ask you. What does Anzac stand for? That's A-N-Z-A-C. So what does Anzac stand for? Okay, so we've got all of the ingredients I've weighed out already. I've put my butter and my golden syrup into a saucepan, and I've actually weighed the butter in the saucepan. Just means I'm not having to dirty more bowls. So the recipe that's shared with you, I have doubled the quantities. So rather than 75 grams of plain flour, I've got 150 grams of flour. Instead of 45 grams of oats, I've got 90 grams of oats. The desiccated coconut, which if you go into the wild aisle in supermarkets, you quite often can pick up some big bags of these. So I've got 80 grams of that rather than 40. I've got 150 grams of brown sugar, and then I've got 120 grams of butter and 2 tablespoons of golden syrup. And then I'm going to do a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda once this has melted. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to put my wet ingredients on to warm up and to melt that butter. So it's just going to go on to a medium heat just to get that done. And whilst that is going on, I'm just going to sieve my flour. So I'm just going to do that. Don't need to sieve all the rest of the ingredients, but I can just sieve that. And then I can put in my oats, the desiccated coconut, and the brown sugar. If you can't get hold of brown sugar, you can just use caster sugar. They just become a little bit more syrupy if you use brown sugar rather than caster. I'm just going to mix that. Any big lumps of the brown sugar, just mix them in. We've even used muscovado sugar at school, and that works really nicely as well. Just has them at a slightly browner mixture before they go into the oven. So I'm still waiting for this to melt down. So whilst that's going on, I'm also then going to preheat my oven to 180 degrees or gas mark 4. I've also lined my baking tray with greaseproof paper, so that's all ready to go. So again, as I've asked before in other videos, what's the function of all the different ingredients? So what's the purpose of all the ingredients being in these biscuits? And another question for you whilst we're waiting for this to melt is these biscuits were often sent to boys that were on the front line during the World War I and World War II from their girlfriends, wives, mothers back home in Australia. Why were they sent to the boys on the front? Why did they last as long as they did? Remember that back 75 years ago, or even more than that, it didn't take 24 hours to get to Australia. So how long did it take? And that will hopefully then give you a bit of an answer as to why these biscuits were so successful in being sent to the European war. So all I'm going to do is just bring that up to the boil very quickly. So you can see that it's really starting to bubble now, which is good. So whilst that is happening, I'm going to add my teaspoon of bicarbonate soda. And you'll notice that we're then straight away, that reaction is taking place and we get this really frothy mixture on the top. So why does that reaction happen? Why does the bicarbonate of soda react with the golden syrup and the butter like that? I'm just going to pour that wet ingredient into my dry. And I'm just going to mix that all around. I would use a spoon at this point, just because otherwise you'll find that you may burn your hands because it's quite hot. Now, something that I haven't put in yet, which is also going to help with binding that all together, is my two tablespoons of water. Now that is the quantity that if the 2 tablespoons of water would be if you hadn't have doubled the recipe. I've not added the 4 tablespoons because I may not need all those 4 tablespoons. And in fact, you can really start to see that's coming together now, so I'm not going to need any more water. So it's quite a crumbly consistency compared to maybe like a cookie dough or a cake mixture, but it should then just still come together quite easily. So that's started to cool down already. So what I'm going to do is just using a spoon, bring it together. Kind of ball it together. And you want to spread these evenly apart because they will spread slightly as they cook in the oven. So once you've got them all rolled out, notice that they're all roughly the same sort of size. That just helps them with the cooking process so that they all cook roughly at the same time. And all I'm then going to do is just press them down very slightly with a fork. Just going to get those into the oven. I have got some mixture left, so you could do a second tray, all I'm going to do is I'm going to retray another lot when these come out of the oven. So these go into the oven for 10 minutes. So with these Anzac biscuits, you'll be able to tell that these are done by the fact that they've spread out, they've changed that colour. But the main thing is at this point is that you actually want to leave them on this tray for a further 5 minutes. They are going to be very, very soft when they first come out. So you want to leave them to harden very slightly and then move them onto a cooling rack. Just going to pop these other ones back into the oven. So whilst they're in the oven, do make sure that you then do all your washing up and making sure that you get your areas nice and clean before you start eating. Just whilst these are cooling down, I am moving this a little bit quicker than I would like, but I'm going to show you how to do this. So the best way to get these off, you could use a fish slice, but if you're wanting to reuse the baking tray very quickly, so you don't have a second tray and you want to get the next batch of biscuits on, if you hold the baking tray and then the paper at the end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the paper and I'm going to remove the baking tray whilst keeping the paper still. So lifting the paper and then just pull the baking tray away, and that will then leave the biscuits still on the baking paper and in the right place, and they can then continue to cool there. Enjoy!